The Holy Gospel this morning comes from St. John in the 15th chapter. And Jesus says, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. You have already been cleansed by the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. And those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. And whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers, and such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples." The Gospel of the Lord. You may be seated. It's a curious thing, this image that Jesus presents of him being the vine, and there's a vine grower who he claims is the Father, and then there are branches who he claims are his disciples. And the way in which Jesus constructs this particular metaphor, he basically says that the vine provides life to the branches, and the branches bear fruit. And the vine grower, who got this all started by planting the vine, continually is pruning and trimming, making sure that the branches are able to bear fruit. But here's the interesting thing. Whenever this project of planting the vine started with God, way back when, billions of years ago, in the cosmic soup in which we all have come, nonetheless, the vine itself does not bear fruit. If it was just the vine grower and the vine, there'd be no fruit, because it is the branches that bear fruit. And so presumably, the vine grower got this all started because the vine grower wanted to see some fruit. And the way in which the vine grower thought it would be best, according to Jesus, is to have this vine that continually supplies the branches with life, so that those branches can bear the fruit that are finally what the vine grower wanted all along. So you and I live now as disciples of Jesus Christ, who feeds us as the vine, and we are the branches. And the life and death that the resurrected Lord has poured into us continually allows us to bear fruit, which is the whole point of why God got this creation started billions of years ago, the fruit. So therefore, you have an integral part in what God wants to see accomplished in the world. Each and every disciple bears the fruit that God desires for the future of the world. And all of you have value. All of you are continually part of what God wants to see this world to finally be about. The fruit that comes from the branches that survive from the vine. Well, good luck. Because there's a bit of an issue with that, right? And that is that you kind of got to know what kind of fruit you're supposed to bear. Now, perhaps we all bear different kinds of fruit. And perhaps even, we don't even bear fruit that's commensurate. Some might bear fruit that goes really well with, fruit salad. Others might bear fruit that goes really well with pasta. Some of us might bear fruit for a little while and then go dormant, and then come back strong. Some of us might continually bear the same fruit again and again and again. And some of us might bear completely different kinds of fruit, depending on where we are in the garden. So the question remains, everything that God has done to this point comes from the fruit that you bear. So the question is, what kind of fruit are you going to bear? Tomorrow morning? This afternoon? For lunch? Whatever. It's an important question that needs to be addressed. And we sit and think about ourselves, and we say, how can we possibly know? I mean, maybe if those of you who have had children, maybe you can opt and say, well, maybe my children are enough. But if you've had children and they've gotten to the teenage years, do you really want to put your entire future on their behavior? Risky. Although your kids are all great, so I'm sure you're fine. What exactly becomes the way in which we understand our fruit to be? How do we go about even knowing? I mean, this is the question that has perplexed me continually. I mean, I can remember years ago, if you would have asked me when I was 23 years old, let's say, so 30 years ago, about 35 years ago, you would have asked me, hey, what do you want to be when you're old, like 40? And, when you're 23, you're looking at yourself and you're saying to yourself, man, if I can make it to 40, I got a chance, So I would have thought I would have been a professor of literature. I mean, that's really what I thought about 35 years or so ago. I was really fascinated with the way that words worked, and I love to read. One of the things I heard of, you love to read if you're the kind of person when you're eating your cereal in the morning, you read the cereal box. How many people have ever read a cereal box? There's the readers, okay? I even knew what the chemicals were in Kellogg's Frosted Flakes. I read that box so well. So I knew I was a reader, and I thought that's what I would do. I mean, I was trained in that. I mean, that's everything that I thought I was going to be. I was going to teach people, that there's these great variety of wonderful books that exist in the world, this world of literature and poetry, and I thought I would just help folks just kind of see just the sheer beauty that comes from the sound of a well-turned phrase, or that comes in the glorious image that some of our great authors over the course of our world have created. It seemed like a relatively easy thing and didn't require a lot of work, just a comfortable chair and a decent light. My father, he was pushing for me to actually get a job that paid money, but those things happen. So there we are. Everything seemed to be going along really well, and then I got married. Now, nobody told me, at least, maybe they told you, but nobody ever really told me that when you get married, now all of a sudden you have to take another person into consideration in your decisions. Yes, Thank you, Pastor Pam. Because all of a sudden now, it's not just about me, I got to start thinking about this other person who also has ideas and thoughts about the fruit that she's to bear. And so, all of a sudden now we're in like these conversations and things and whatnot, and who knows, and there we are. So, we got married and we lived on the south side of Chicago in Hyde Park. And the way it worked is, she was at work, she worked in this cubicle way 30 miles away from us. She'd get up in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, get to work and come home. And I got to actually just wander around the south side of Chicago, read some books, visit the neighbors. We had Muhammad Ali just lived a couple of blocks north of us in a very nice mansion. And down the road from where we lived was the mayor of Chicago, Harold Washington. He lived in an apartment. He had a person that lived across from him, a community organizer, Barry, and his wife, Michelle. They would go on to be famous as Barack and Michelle Obama. But, so it's a nice little neighborhood where we lived. And I was walking around that neighborhood trying to decide how am I going to actually, do anything worthwhile here in Chicago. And now I find myself married, and I thought I always wanted to be a professor of literature, and it just seemed like that was just not available. And so I was just kind of struggling, and I walked by and I saw a little sign that said, Literacy Volunteers of America needs tutors. Teach someone or help someone to learn to read. Help an adult learn to read. Now I thought to myself, wow, I can read in 6 languages. I should be able to help an adult read. That seems like something I should be able to do. And so I applied, went through the training, and got hooked up with a guy named Howard. Howard was a former gang member, and with the Blackstone Rangers, who then became El Rukan. And he just had pulled out of the gang, and he wanted to learn how to read. He was 57 years old at the time. And so Howard and I were sitting down, and we met at this wonderful little church in Hyde Park there, and that was hosting these literacy seminars. And so Howard came in, and we met, and we introduced ourselves. We had nothing in common. You know, here's an African-American man, 57 years old, didn't know how to read, grew up on the south side of Chicago, gang member, things like that, been in jail most of his life. And then there was me, pudgy little white guy, recently married, just kind of life. So we're sitting there, and we're supposed to ask, why the person wanted to read. And the adults come for many reasons. They all had their reasons on why they wanted to read. And so our first question, we kind of got the sense to know each other. So I said to Howard, Howard, why do you want to learn how to read? And Howard said, he said, I got an 11-year-old granddaughter. And she lives with me. And I said, okay. And every Sunday she goes to Mount Tabor Baptist Church. I said, I know Mount Tabor Baptist Church. And she comes home with Sunday school lessons, and I want to be able to read the Sunday school lessons with her. Now, when I joined the Literacy Volunteers of America, they said, you can read anything you want with them, but kind of stay away from the religious stuff. And I was like, I can do that. But there I am, sitting there with the guy whose whole reason for learning to read is so that he can read the Bible. And he looked at me and he said, do you think you could help me with that? And I said, Howard, you may have found the only tutor in the entire United States of America who can help you with that. So he and I read the Bible together for 18 months as he learned to read through reading the Scriptures. And it seemed to me that might be something that had a future for me. That if I was going to bear fruit in this world, perhaps teaching or helping someone to read the Bible might be a direction in which to look. And so now, about 7 years ago, my wife decided to take another job. And there's a pattern, by the way. My wife takes a job, and then I go in the neighborhood and wander around, look for something to do. So I'm wandering around UNO about 7 years ago, looking for something to do. Chris is working, all this kind of stuff. It's a beautiful day again, fall, semester started. I see we got one of our UNO students is here with us this morning. That's great. I was looking around, and I thought, man, there must be something I can do with this university. Must be something I can do. And then I thought, I know. Maybe they got a campus ministry, Lutheran campus ministry thing. So I sent some emails to the phone calls. They do have a campus ministry. There's no leader, there's no pastor associated with it, but there's a few students that gather together once a week usually, and half dozen or so. And you could use some leader to help guide them. I said, okay. So I show up, and I sit down with these 6 folks. There's 3 men, 3 women, and they're all sitting there. They're UNO students. They're excited. The new semester's coming. A couple of juniors, a couple of seniors going to graduate. It's all kind of fun. And I say to them, I said, well, your campus ministry, what do you want to do? And they said, well, I know it sounds kind of weird, but could you help us with a Bible study? And I looked at each one of those young folks and stared them in the eye, and I said, are you serious? And they were like, yeah. Nobody ever wants to do Bible study with us. And I was like, you may have found the one unemployed pastor who could help you out with this. And so that's what we did. And one night, we had gone out to Vala's pumpkin patch a year or so later and had been studying the Bible for a good year or so, and took a break and went out and did some little social event out in Vala's, and we were driving back. It was late at night, about 11 o'clock, and I was driving, and one of the folks was sitting up in the front seat. His name was Joel, and Joel was telling me that he was going to go into mathematics. He's now in the doctoral program at the University of North Carolina in mathematics. He was telling me about this class he had in discrete mathematics, and he was explaining all this stuff about discrete mathematics. And the only reason why I keep saying discrete mathematics is because that's the only 2 words I understood him saying in the 10 minutes he was talking. And so as he was going along telling me about all this, he said, so what did you do? How did you study? And I said, actually, I told him a little bit of my history. I said I started out, teaching English literature at the University of Texas, and through various things, I, eventually became a pastor and professor of theology. And he goes, He said, so you went from teaching about a lot of books one way to teaching one book a lot of ways. It took me till I was 52 years old for someone to finally tell me what kind of fruit I bear. It is a never-ending process to discover the fruit that God has abided in you through Jesus Christ. As long as you are breathing, you are bearing fruit. And it might change. It might be a long process of discovery. It might mean something completely different than it does now. But God has a plan and a purpose for the fruit that you bear. And God has graced you uniquely as you to bear your fruit. And there will be times, perhaps not as crystal clear as mine were, in which the fruit will be understood and what you are to do. But there will always be a reason for the grace and the gifts that you've been given, to be able to live in the power and love of God so that you too will be able to abide. That no matter how it goes, no matter where it is or when it is, the love that God has given you through Jesus Christ will abide in you, so as a branch, you can bear the fruit that God's wanted all along. Amen. Let us stand and sing.